Now entering the Squared Circle pit, comedian and metal musician, actor, writer, a man of many commas, Brian Posehn. Thank you so much for talking on Squared Circle Pit.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Album is called Grandpa Metal. It is a metal album that you wrote with Scott Ian. You're doing the lyrics. Scott wrote some great riffs. You got some great soloists. It's a quite an all-star team. And one thing that I found interesting is the promo photo. I don't know if it's for the album or just your current promo photo in general. You're wearing a Roddy Piper t-shirt. And when I saw that, I was like, I got to have him on the show. I want to talk wrestling. So is Roddy Piper your guy?
One of them. Yeah, definitely in the 80s he was. I love Taker. I mean, being a metalhead, some of my favorite guys are like, and I still currently watch. So I'm not totally up to date right now, but I love WWE. I watch AEW. Also, I just got into that in the last year. Well, obviously, it's only been going so long, but
Right.
I'm into all those. You know, my favorite guys are like the guys that are kind of metal related.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
Taker. I love Eric Rowan. I love Bray Wyatt. You know, guys like that. The obvious metalheads.
Aleister Black.
Yeah. I don't know Aleister very well, but it's totally up my alley. When a guy comes out to a metal song, and you know that it's, you know, a lot of the WWE sounds metal-ish,
Mm-hmm.
but when their entrance song is for sure metal, you know, I love them. Well, that said, I like a lot of the baby faces too. Like I maybe because having a kid, I have a 10-year-old that I've tried to get into wrestling. You know, well, he likes it, but he's not as crazy about it as maybe I would hope. He's always found the, you know, guys like Cena, and then people that I know not a lot of people don't love Roman, but I feel like people have come around to him after he got sick and beat it. But for a while there, I was one of the only friends of mine that was waving the Roman Reigns flag. Like other wrestling friends of mine are like, dude, that guy's garbage.
Well, I would argue that the way they write for him is, you know, garbage, but he's a great wrestler.
Yeah.
That's so funny. That's so true. I noticed that as well. Like I went to a house show like 5 years ago, and I'm a very cynical wrestling fan. Not the biggest fan of John Cena, but you know, like I respect him and like all that he does outside of wrestling. I just don't like him, the kayfabe character. But
right.
When I went to a house show, like I was sitting next to kids and seeing how they reacted to the show completely like made me realize what an asshole I was being, you know, just like, oh, it's for them. It's like, and it's such a different experience.
Yeah, you're right. It's hard to be cynical about it when you see like the kids are looking at these guys like they're superheroes, you know, and you're like, that guy's a douche. It's like calling Captain America a douche. You know?
Yeah, exactly. So do you have a first wrestling memory? Like, do you remember how you got into it?
Yeah, man. My mom, I was raised by a single mom, and she still would watch it with me. And I grew up in the Bay Area in the 70s. And, you know, before I feel like they called it Big Time Wrestling was our Bay Area one. And it was guys like Pat Patterson was like one of the first local guys I got into. And I remember thinking he was super cool as a kid. And then my mom and I would wrestle on the bed till I got to a certain age where it was weird to wrestle with your mom. But she, you know, because she was raising a boy and she was, you know, encouraging boy-like behavior. So she would just do it with me. She'd wrestle with me on the bed. She'd call herself Moondog Maine and stuff like that. and Greasy Spoon. And we'd wrestle and I also watched it on TV. And then in the 80s, the first one I went to live was, I feel like it was a house show and not WWE wasn't even televising by that point. So they were all house shows back then.
Right. There were no pay-per-views. There was no cable.
So, but I saw Hulk live and I can't remember who he was fighting, but one of my takeaways was, the Fabulous Moolah, is that her name?
Yeah.
Marvelous? Yeah. She came out, and I loved, you know, yelling at heels. I was like, oh, this is amazing. I get to just scream at this woman, and I'm yelling at her, and she flipped me off, and I was blown away. I was like, this is the fucking coolest thing ever. Like, this woman, you know, just locked eyes with me and flipped me off.
Yeah, that's when you realize, like, oh, this is a two-way interaction. Like that, I remember.
It's kind of real. It made it more real. It's like, oh, she could kick my ass. She's not a character right now. She's a human, and she looks pissed at me. This could go terribly wrong. I'm a teenage boy about to get throttled by this old lady.
So, did you get into wrestling before metal, or which came first for you?
God, good question. At that time, I wasn't crazy into wrestling, but I did, more metal. Mm-hmm. I'm way more of a wrestling fan now than I was as a kid. I mean, I liked it as a kid, but I had other obsessions. Comic books, heavy metal was I would say I was more of a metalhead back then.
I see. And so when did your wrestling fandom really kick into high gear? Like, when were you, like, really a wrestling fan? You know, like, hardcore about it, if that ever happened.
More in my 20s and since. Mm-hmm. I loved the Attitude Era, and, I was a strange thing. I had moved back in with my mom because I had hurt myself. And then when the Attitude Era started, when Raw versus War and all that, started watching all that stuff and switching back to, remember when the two shows were up against each other. And,
right, Raw and Nitro.
Yeah.
And were you more of a WWF guy at the time or a WCW guy? Because the NWO was pretty
I liked
cool.
Both.
Yeah.
I liked guys on both ends. I liked New World Order. I liked when the big guys came out, like Stone Cold, and when those guys broke. I liked a lot of them, and Taker, and yeah.
That time for me is like my kind of like golden era. I did grow up in the 80s and I started watching in the 80s. But like for me personally, it was like when I was in high school and like it was just so cool. And it was the first time for me that like everybody thought wrestling was cool again. But after like WrestleMania 3, because I feel like for the longest time, I couldn't really tell people I was a wrestling fan. It was like a little embarrassing. But then like around then, it was like everybody talked about it.
And I feel like it got cool in the mid 90s.
Right. Yeah. And even you saw it in like mainstream entertainment, like they would be more on, the Tonight Show and accept it.
Actually, early 90s, early 90s is when I got back in, but yeah.
I see. Early 90s got back in, but like late 90s is when it really like peaked, I feel. And then also with the two shows. And so I think that was like a big part of it for me was that like, oh, it's so cool that it's cool again. And I could share this thing I'm passionate about and not like hide it, which I feel in a way that's kind of something that metal and wrestling have in common. And I think metal and wrestling have a lot in common.
Absolutely.
That like people are kind of holding in. They don't want people to judge them based on what do you think?
Well, yeah, I agree. And being a nerd about a bunch of different things, whatever you were nerdy about was not cool then. Like, to be obsessed with stuff was not cool in the 80s. Like when I grew up, whatever you were into, like I was into Star Wars too late. My friends were already out of Star Wars by Jedi, and I was still in. And so I was I was a misfit in high school because I still cared about this thing that no one cared about anymore. And so I feel like I identify with that. Like, almost everything I liked, I had to be kind of secretive about. Like I was still reading comic books. And then, in the end of the 80s when comic books got great again, when guys like Frank Miller and Alan Moore and all these great writers started coming out, that became kind of cool to talk about, but not really. You still, end of the 80s, early 90s, I still like kept my obsessions, under wrap. I wouldn't share them with everybody, whatever I was into.
Yeah. And that's what, just listening to talk about like comics, metal, and wrestling. It's kind of like metal and comics together kind of is wrestling.
Yeah. And horror. The fact that there was crossover, the fact that Piper showed up in a John Carpenter movie for me. I mean, that was amazing. What They Live was kind of, like, oh, this is okay. This is a crossover of these things I like.
I think They Live is the best movie starring a pro wrestler. Arguably, it's one of the best movies of all time. Like, especially today, like how relevant it still is. But even at the time, it was like, wow, there's a wrestler in like a good movie. It's not like Mr. Nanny. You know?
Right, or the Marine 3 or whatever. Yeah.
What were your thoughts on Hulk Hogan? Like you're a little older than I am. So I feel like Hulk Hogan was the initial John Cena from friends of mine that I talked to, where like kids loved him, but after a few years, like everyone else was kind of just like, oh God, this again, like terrible main events, all this stuff. Like how did you feel about Hogan growing up?
Well, that's probably why I kind of got out of it, like by the early 80s, like when he got so huge and became like Mr. T or whatever. Mm-hmm. That kids younger than me were into, I kind of tapped out anyway, and then I didn't come back in till, like we were saying, when the two networks started battling mm-hmm. against each other.
Oh, interesting. And did you watch any like Ric Flair, any WCW at the time?
Because the end of the 80s is when I started comedy. So I wasn't really, a lot of things I wasn't as into because I was so focused on just, comedy was my obsession at the
right.
end. From 87 to like 91. Well, still is, but I mean, then I started to get back into some things that I loved.
I see. So you just had no time for anything else because you were just so fixated on.
Yeah, and girls finally liked me when I when I had confidence and I was doing stand-up comedy and thought I was hot shit. So I was finally somewhat appealing to women. Confidence goes a long way,
Yeah. That just if you find yourself not appealing to women and lacking confidence, just get up on stage, write some jokes, and if you get some laughs, it'll help.
It worked for me because once I started getting laughs, I was like, this is what I'm supposed to do, and then I was like, hello, ladies. Want to meet the funniest man in Sacramento?
Was there a big comedy scene in Sacramento at the time, or were you like one of four guys?
No, there were a few. There were several, and we were all driving down to San Francisco once we, got better at it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Have you ever thought about like writing for WWE? I know there's a lot of comedy writers that end up having a stint there.
I have. I would love to. I would still love to do something with one of the big ones, mm-hmm. AEW or WWE, or it doesn't matter. I mean, I would love to. I'm hoping somebody picks up one of my Grandpa Metal songs as their theme song. I kind of hinted to Eric Rowan that he could kind of take anything he wanted because he liked the record.
Oh, cool.
He put something on Twitter how he liked Grandpa Metal, and I was like, sweet.
Take some riffs for yourself.
But, Tommy Blotch is a friend of mine, and he
was the head writer. Yeah, I've had him on the show. Yeah.
Yeah, of Death Clock and Metalocalypse. And so when he had done that, I asked him, what was that like? He had a bunch of stories. But I was definitely interested. I don't know if I could do that as a full-time gig, but I would definitely love to dabble.
That is interesting. Like, Tommy was writing like some of the stuff we were just talking about as like the peak of the era because he was the head writer there.
Right.
From like, I think 98 to like 2001 or something like that when it was like, everything awesome. and then he did Death Clock. So it's like, it's so wild how many people had like a foot in the wrestling world. Not even like Freddie Prinze Jr. was on the booking team for like a really long time just because he happened to be a fan and was backstage and 71 was like, do you want to help us out? So maybe. Yeah.
And David Arquette too. I remember like seeing him show up and going, what the hell? But it's like, well, they're fans. And, and I guess when the network found out they were fans, like, of course they use them. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And now Arquette is he's actually I think he just released a documentary because he had this whole year or two comeback on the indie scene where he was just doing wild matches. I don't know if you saw, he had like a death match where.
No. I didn't know that at all.
Oh,
I got to check that out. That's amazing.
He's been mostly doing comedy matches, but Last summer there was a show by this company, GCW, Game Changer Wrestling. And the main event, it was like a show in LA, and the main event was David Arquette versus this indie wrestler, Nick Gage, who I like he's like the most violent hardcore wrestler. He's like the equivalent of like a New Jack or someone very, very like he does death matches. And so I think David Arquette was way out of his element because this guy started pulling out light tubes and hit him with light tubes and he started bleeding, and you noticeably see the fear in David Arquette's face. And at one point, I'm not exaggerating, his Arquette's neck got gashed so bad that he panicked and he had to like leave the ring and Gage wanted to keep the match going, and Kurt's like, my neck, like I could die, and just laid down and was like, pin me. We need to end this match. It was
wow.
It was insane. It was legitimately out of control.
That's how I think any wrestling match with me would go. Like, I have the size, you know, I could definitely be part of the Wyatt family. You know, if I was gonna wrestle, that feels like the place I would have wound up, you know.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah.
Couldn't you see me standing next to Rowan?
Absolutely. You know? Or like in the late 90s, you would be like in the oddities, you know, if you remember them with like Gangrel and
yeah, but just give me a sheet mask and put me out there. Those guys, when they were doing that a couple of years ago, I got one of the black sheep masks and terrified my son. But but in reality, if I even stepped in the ring, I would not. I couldn't take a hit. I'm such a puss in real life.
Oh, I'm right there with you. I've talked about this on my show before, but like I did 1 day of training, and not even a day. I did like half a day, and I was just sore for 4 days. I was like, I'm never doing this. This is insane. I can't do this. Like, I'm not an athlete.
No, even the cardio would kill me.
Yeah.
And then to have a grown man flip me on my back, I'd probably just explode. Like all my bones would break when I hit the mat.
Well, in spite of that, have you ever thought about, like, if you were a wrestler, like other than the Wyatt thing, have you ever come up with a gimmick for yourself?
No, but it would be metal, and it would be evil, and I would it would be like a Taker or God, now I can't remember his name. The politician. Taker's my brain's farting right now.
JBL?
No, the guy that's high up in WWE. Bald guy. He's also a local politician.
Oh, Kane.
Kane, yeah, duh. See no evil.
Right. Horror legend Glenn Jacobs, a.k.a. Kane.
Yeah, and local politician. It would be a guy like that. It would be like, I probably wouldn't talk, because people hearing my voice, you'd realize that I'm not very menacing. But if I just didn't say anything, I'd be like a guy who just like gave surly looks, but acted evil. And
what would be your finishing move? Have you thought about that?
No, never.
I feel like it would have to be something where you wouldn't get off your feet, because you don't want to be taking bumps here. It has to be like a choke slam or a power bomb.
It would be like a curb stomp, my version of a curb stomp or something, where I get them on the ground and then stomp on their face, or just fall on them.
Oh yeah, there you go. You could do a big splat, like a Yokozuna bonsai drop, maybe.
The dead man or the coffin, and I just fall on them.
Well, let's talk a little bit about AEW. I'm so excited. Like, AEW to me is so, like, I mean, obviously it's run by a billionaire, but it feels very punk rock, like very metal, in that it is like, we are the alternative. Like, there is this mainstream pop music that, you know, they're providing this music that a lot of people who are passionate about this are rejecting. So we want to do like the underground version of wrestling, slightly overground, obviously. So that's what's appealing to me. What do you enjoy about AEW?
Well, I'm not super into it, but I mean, the immediate draw was I'm a Jericho fan, so it was another place to watch him, and it's just I feel like I'm latching onto what you were saying about it, the fact that it is the cooler version of the mainstream thing, you know, and I was kind of looking for that, because in the last couple of years, some of the stories I was dropping out of on WWE, and I was watching it real intensely for the couple of years ago.
What was the era?
Rollins, and when the three of them were
the Shield.
The Shield, you know, I was watching it a lot then. I was watching it every week then, and I just feel like in the last year and a half or two, I just sort of became less interested, and then just the timing of AEW in the last year has just been perfect. It's like, oh, okay, well, here's this other fun thing. I'm probably not watching as many as, like, I'm not obsessed with either one of them right now, but I'm a fan of both, you know what I mean?
Right, yeah. I feel like with WWE right now, it's very hard to want to invest in the storylines, because the payoffs are always, I feel, just honestly just disappointing, like, not to be negative about
right.
it. It's like just basic storyline structure doesn't exist. Like, things just happen, and then you ask as a fan, like, why did this happen? And you go online and read, like, oh, they just decided to change the story, and it's like, well,
yeah. And I mean, I still like some of the people there. I like Braun Strowman, and we took my kid to a house show like in December. It's still fun, you know.
Right.
I'm just not. I'm not watching it every single week, and I'm not watching both shows like I was. And they're still getting recorded. But and then with AEW, I'm not obsessed yet, but I'm getting into it. And I mean, I love that there's this option. That there's this other thing that, like it was in the '90s when there were two that you could watch.
Absolutely.
I like that. I like that there's an option to it. I like sometimes the small guys, because I'm not small. Those guys are really fun to watch. Who's the little guy that's part of the Dynamo?
Marco Stunt?
Yeah, Marco Stunt is fucking amazing to watch. And the fact that he's so ballsy and fearless, that it makes it fun.
I agree. I love that they give guys like that an opportunity who you would never see a guy like that.
Oh not in the network. No.
Yeah.
What is he, 4 feet tall? He's tiny.
Yeah. Yeah. He looks like a child. He's like in his 20s, yes. But and also I love that Jericho is just unleashed. Like we're getting like unfiltered
yes,
Chris Jericho, and he has been the true MVP of like all of, like he has shown his value tenfold on like, hey, I am like, he is the Ric Flair of that promotion, like the 80s.
I agree.
Ric Flair.
And I love that Moxley's finally getting to be himself, because I feel like he was really overlooked after the Shield, went away, and he was one of my favorites, and now he's kind of popular again on this other network. It's nice to see.
Yeah.
Part of the problem with WWE is like the guys you really get into get underused. Like I said earlier that I was such a Bray Wyatt fan. For a while, Bray Wyatt was getting overlooked and not getting, the personality and what a great wrestler he is. He wasn't being used in the right way, I think. I feel like now, they've kind of got a hook for him. But for a while, it was like...
Yeah. He's like the best merch seller right now, too, with this new gimmick. But
still...
Yeah, sure. Right? Even still, though, I don't know if you have been paying too much attention, but like 2 weeks ago, they had a Saudi Arabia pay-per-view, and Goldberg beat him like in a second. Like it was less than a minute.
I thought Goldberg retired.
Well, they brought him back. I guess they needed like a special attraction for the Saudi show, because those Saudis are still stuck in the 90s and they want like these older stars. And they originally brought him back to lose to Bray Wyatt. But then I guess they figured that like Goldberg versus Roman Reigns would have been a more appealing WrestleMania main event than Roman Reigns versus Bray Wyatt. So they gave Goldberg the title, and now that's what they're doing for WrestleMania.
Right. Yeah, see.
How do you feel about them going ahead with doing it in like an empty arena? I didn't really want to talk about, with current events too much, but just like, do you think it's the right move to do an empty arena show for WrestleMania?
Yeah. Well, I think people need to be entertained. I mean, I would do stand-up in an empty comedy club and pay-per-view it, because we all need to work. I'm starting to panic. Already my March and my April completely went away in the last 2 days. So I won't be working till the summer again. So I get it. I mean, the show has to go on. Mm-hmm. People were planning on watching this thing. The fuck thing is I feel bad for all the people that were traveling out to Tampa and now, have to figure that out. But yeah, there should absolutely be a show.
Yeah. I'm of the same mind. I think they can make it fun and like make it unique with the audience isn't there, but like it could be unique in its own way. And I feel there's almost an appeal to it now.
Hasn't one of them already done an empty show like for the regular shows or no?
WWE, they did SmackDown last Friday. It was empty, and they did a bunch of matches, and the matches were a little awkward because the wrestlers are just so used to playing to the crowd, but like there's no crowd to play to. So
I gotta watch it. I gotta check that out. You were talking about the Saudi Arabia shows. I want to watch that Saudi pay-per-view because the last one was so weird when they brought Hulk back too. Like, I'm not a fan of Hulk's politics or
his outbursts. Yeah.
Some of his, I can't get behind the racism at all. That was a weird thing.
Yeah, this last Saudi show was very awkward as well, just for the same reasons of it's just weird. Like the crowd is half into it. The wrestling is never good because it's like everyone's jet lag. It's 100 degrees out there. It's very odd. But yeah, so on Raw this week they had a match that went like 3 minutes because they're like kind of fearful now of doing these empty arena matches. So it was like mostly promos, and then they re-showed this year's Royal Rumble for the whole show for like 2 hours of the show. And AEW's first empty show is tonight. So we'll see how they kind of approach it. But I'm very curious. And I agree. Like, as someone who is stuck in his home, like, the entertainment, like, we could use it.
Yeah, none of it should go away. I can't wait to get back because I've still not gone to AEW live. And I really want to go, the next time they're in LA, and then bring my son, because I feel like he might get into that too. He hasn't really watched. He's seen me watching AEW, but he kind of was, he's still young, so he's like, why is he called John Moxley now? And I'm like, well.
Right. I feel like AEW has, just by the ratings, they appeal more to younger demos, but because they also have younger guys, I feel like someone your son's age could find someone to relate to more in AEW than he would in WWE. As we wrap up, though, I do want to just tackle one more topic really quickly, and that is how wrestling has influenced politics. I feel like in the last 4 years now, especially with our president, like, I find that like kayfabe and like cutting a promo and all this like wrestling stuff can be seen in our political universe now. Like, do you find yourself noticing wrestling?
Yeah, I wish my party would embrace that. That's, I know The Rock, if he ran, he wouldn't run as a Democrat, but part of me likes to think he would, because we need that. The Democrats need a guy like Trump who can cut a promo.
Right.
Now we have a president heel. We need a president babyface to come in and kick the shit out of the heel.
That is a great analogy, and I'm totally with you. And like, I despise Trump, obviously, but sometimes, just as a wrestling fan, I can't help but like cheer for his like heel tactics, like especially when he cuts promos on like somebody he just fired or whatever that I hate anyway. But it's like, this guy is like the best heel.
When he's making mistakes that are killing people, like, not even the worst heel did that in wrestling.
Right.
Kane never got people killed.
Right. He might have burned a few people, but they all survived. Well, Brian, thank you so much. It's in times like this, it was a pleasure to kind of distract ourselves for half an hour and talk about something as silly as pro wrestling.
Yeah, absolutely.
I hope you and your family remain safe and get through this okay.
Yeah, where are you? What part of the country do you live in?
Oh, I'm in Brooklyn, New York. So like, we're kind of also on a bit of a lockdown.
How strange is that? How strange is it walking around the city? Is like everything shut down?
Yeah, everything. It's like everything at all times feels like it's early Sunday morning. That's kind of how it feels. I haven't gone to the city too much. I'm just avoiding like any public transportation or whatever. But
even Brooklyn, even in your neighborhood.
It's like everything is totally shut down other than the grocery store. So it's very odd. And like, there's just this weird, anxiety in the air, as I'm sure everywhere.
Like even Duff's, all the metal bars are probably closed too, right? They have to.
Yeah, they announced on Monday they shut everything down. Everything but non-essential. Like, essentially only grocery stores are open. Restaurants are allowed to do takeout. And that's it. And like...
Right. That's what it is here.
So it's a very weird time. All the shows have been canceled. There's nothing to do. And they don't want you to do anything.
And here, it's so much more driving city than Brooklyn is, unless you're a cab driver. But... Brooklyn, I feel like every time I'm there, I'm walking around a lot. But here, it's weird because no one walks here, but no one's driving here either. So if you're out on the main streets, there's friggin' no one, and it's you could shoot it. You could shoot an apocalypse movie if you wanted to right now, very easily.
Yeah, well, I mean, I feel like that's honestly a good thing because now people are listening.
Yeah, cool, man. Well, thanks. Nice talking to you.
It's an absolute pleasure, and stay safe. And once again, the album is Grandpa Metal. Everyone go check it out. And thank you, Brian. Hopefully I'll see you at a wrestling show.
All right, man. I hope so too.